Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and on today's video I have a good one for you. If you're a fan of the Saucony Triumph, then you are definitely going to want to stay through this video, because you remember last year when they released the Triumph 22, they made some big changes. Like, it was a big deal to add power on PB, and normally we wouldn't expect too bigger changes to come between a year when they make really big changes and then the next year. But the Triumph 23 is actually a big departure from the Triumph 22, and the changes that they've made, although maybe if you're just looking at the two may not look that different from the outside, from a runner's experience, the Triumph 23 is a much better running shoe. I don't even think I've introduced this video yet. Guys, this is my review of the Saucony Triumph 23. Let's get into it. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks to Saucony. They were good enough to send me this pair of the Triumph 23 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say. They don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you're going to be able to pick up a pair of the Saucony Triumph 23 for $170. Of course, I'll place a link in the show notes below in case you want to pick up a pair for yourself. So in a world where we're seeing a lot of the companies dropping the drops of their high cushion, their max cushion daily trainers down, the Triumph 23 remains the same as last year. We have 37 in the heel, 27 in the forefoot for a 10mm drop, which is a good thing because we're still getting that high cushion, right? We're going to have a very protective shoe under our feet. Now, it's not max cushion, but I don't know. Do we need a 42, 43, 44 plus millimeters of foam under our feet to get the most protective experience? I don't think so. And I can tell you from my runs in the shoe, this 37 stack in the heel and the 27 in the forefoot is more than enough to feel protective. Like, I wasn't left wanting for more. But also, it's a good thing that Saucony hasn't cut down on any of the midsole foam, because the biggest difference between the 23 and the 22 is the weight. And in the sample size, it's dropped almost an ounce. Saucony claims that in the US men's size 9, the Triumph 23 took the scale at 9.2 ounces or 263 grams. And in my size, a US men's size 13, the Triumph 23 would tip the scale at 11.7 ounces or 331 grams. That's a 19 gram reduction over my size in the Triumph 22, which I happen to have right here. Yeah, you see what I mean? Like, from the surface, the shoes don't look that different, right? I suppose it helps that they sent me the same colorway both years. And I've got to say, I'm liking this blue midsole foam on the 22 a little better than like boring gray on the 23. But looks aside, I can definitely feel the difference in how much lighter version 23 is over version 22. So as I said in the beginning, if you are a Triumph fan, then you are going to be excited about this update. And obviously, I don't mean in looks, they look very similar, but in performance. But before we get into performance and the ride, let's start at the top and work our way down. And as we would expect with a high cushion daily trainer, we have a lot of padding coming around the heel collar. I think when I hold both shoes up like right next to each other, let me just show you the 22 again. To me, it almost looks like the 22 has more padding around the heel collar than the 23. But in actual fact, when I put my hand in and I start feeling around and I feel both, I don't think there's that much difference. But Saucony had to lose the weight from somewhere. So yeah, maybe they took out a little bit of padding around the heel collar, although it's not noticeable to the touch, and it's definitely not noticeable to the feel when you put your foot in. The Triumph 23 still has a very rigid heel counter. I wouldn't expect that to change. Saucony has done away with the heel pull that we had on version 22, and now we've got just like an elf ear design if you needed that to grab on to just help put the shoe on. But really, it's not needed at all in a shoe like this. You should be able to just put your foot in and then just step down into the shoe. There's a lot of structure around here just helping you do that. The tongue on the Triumph 23 is, yeah, it's just what we would expect from a daily trainer. It is nice and padded. I mean, I've seen thicker padded tongues, but this is still on the heavier padding side, so it is going to give you that nice plush feel when you put your foot in. And the tongue is gusseted, and we do have a lace loop this year on the 23, whereas the 22 didn't have it. Now, another area that I noticed that Saucony is saving some weight on version 23 is with the gusset. The gussets on the tongue of the version 23 are just a little smaller. So let's say they're like that on version 23. On version 22, they probably come down a little further on the inside. So shrinking those gussets is really going to do nothing for the experience of the shoe. That tongue still isn't going to go anywhere, but they're able to just save that little bit of weight by shrinking those gussets. The upper, Saucony says that they have made a more breathable upper, and you know what, I suppose that's true. Let me just get this other one in my hand. Yeah, it feels a little softer. The upper on the 22 just feels a little more rigid. So yes, I would agree with that. I'm going to say that the upper on the 23 is more breathable than that of the 22. However, right now, this is really disgusting. but these shoes are wet in my hands because I ran in them this morning. And when I run here in Florida, especially in the summertime, I tend to sweat. And when I sweat, that sweat kind of runs down into the shoes. And at the end of the run, my shoes are left feeling wet. So I wouldn't call this a breathable upper, even though it probably is more breathable than version 22. That's what we get. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't buy a high cushion daily trainer expecting it to feel like a race day shoe. You know, Saucony has a lot of other options out there for faster and lighter shoes. But when you buy the Triumph 23, you're looking at cruising, right? You're looking at nice, easy runs where your focus is comfort. And the Triumph 23 definitely delivers on that. But more on that in just a second. As far as overlays go, yeah, there aren't many overlays, at least apparent overlays, but this is a very structured shoe, so there's a lot going on here. Of course, we have the obvious branding here on the lateral side, a little bit here on the medial side. You can see the different structures of the upper just in the pattern of the weave. And the toe bumper here, it's quite rigid. You can see how it kind of stands straight up, just making sure your toe box has enough room. And then we've got a lot of built up kind of overlays. Maybe these are reflective here on the back of the shoe. And then of course we've got the reinforcement coming along the eyelet chain. Now, as far as fit goes, these fit me the same as every other Saucony shoe. I'm wearing a US men's size 13 in these, and they fit me true to size. Now, I have the regular version, and I still had plenty of room inside. Like, if you had just slightly wider feet than me, the Triumph 23 in the regular version is going to work for you, but they also offer it in a wide version. So if you needed that extra space, just know that it is available for you. Saucony does claim that on the Triumph 23, they have a new, more responsive sock liner. And it's quite possible that this is true. Like, this actually could work, and you'll understand why when we get to the ride section. But they're making that assertion, and I've got no reason to doubt it. Although, looking at it, it just looks like another sock liner to me. But I think everything is working together for the benefit of the shoe, or the benefit of the runner that's wearing the shoe. So let's come down to the midsole. And again, Saucony is using their PWRRUN PB midsole foam, except it's not the same PWRRUN PB that they used last year. In fact, if you keep track of reviews as the years go on, I really don't expect you to keep track of reviews. But a lot of people complained that the PWRRUN PB in the Triumph 22 was not PWRRUN PB-ish. Right? You know what I mean? It was a little firm, it was a little dead, and there were a lot of complaints. I mean, for me, I thought it worked fine as like a daily trainer, but daily trainers are inherently unexciting. But Saucony apparently has listened to their runners. And this PWRRUN PB in version 23 has been reformulated, and it is now softer and lighter than ever before. So with the midsole foam adding the most amount of weight to a shoe, I imagine this is where they're getting this big weight drop. And as far as softness goes, yes, it is definitely softer than the PWRRUN PB in version 22. If we just take a brief look at the outsole, yeah, you can see that Saucony is using a little more, strategic outsole rubber placement. We have a lot of rubber up here on the forefoot. We have the sides down here with more rubber on the lateral heel, because that's where a lot of runners, including myself, touch down. And we have this nice bit of exposed PWRRUN PB here in the middle, which is obviously saving a little bit of weight. And let's see, it is making the shoe fairly flexible. Yeah, I mean, that's fairly flexible. Now, if we just look at the bottom of the Triumph 22, you can see we've got those rails of outsole rubber that come down the outside. So really, that is also contributing to the weight loss of the Triumph 23 because they're just using less outsole rubber. It works. In fact, just for my, oh gosh, yeah, this is much stiffer than version 23. By the way, this is version 22. It is stiffer than this version 23. I think I'm getting my numbers mixed up, but don't worry, there's not going to be a test later. I'm just trying to get all this information across while you're still paying attention. So let's talk about the ride now. And you guessed it, at least in my opinion, the ride of the Triumph 23 is, I don't know, I want to say 10 times better, but maybe 100 times better. Maybe 100 times is too much. But let's just say much. The ride of the Triumph 23, for me at least, is so much better than that of the Triumph 22. In fact, and I don't often say this about daily trainers, the PWRRUN PB in the Triumph 23 almost makes this a fun shoe to run in. Now, I am not going to tell you that this is a speed day shoe. I certainly will not be taking this out for intervals or a tempo run. But if you are looking for comfort and you are looking for a fairly responsive ride, like it was more responsive than I thought it would be, I think the Triumph 23 could be a shoe worth looking for. In fact, even as I hold these two shoes up, and they look so similar, and I often feel bad suggesting that people buy the updated shoes when there really is no update. This is a year that I can't say that. The Triumph 23 is so much better than the Triumph 22 that for me it's a no-brainer. Like, it's surprising that these are the same shoes if you go by how they feel on the run. Oh, and one more thing I noticed, and you're gonna see this right away. If I hold this up, can you see that sole flare of version 22 is just so wide here on the heel. Saucony has definitely just trimmed it down just a little bit. And by trimming it down, they haven't just made the shoe lighter. I mean, obviously they've made the shoe lighter by maybe using just a little less foam. What they've done, more importantly, is to make the shoe feel less clunky. Now, if you haven't experienced this, sometimes when a shoe has a very wide rear end, you can sometimes kick your other leg as you're running, as your foot swings by. And even if you don't, that clunky feeling that you're kind of having to bring your foot out a little more, or you're just swinging so much weight through, is noticeable when a shoe just has too much junk in the trunk. And that's been totally eliminated with version 23. So well done to Saucony. This was actually a very good update, this hugely popular shoe. And I think the people are going to agree. But of course, if you are looking for a max cushion daily trainer, there are a lot of options out there. And maybe if you are looking to pick up a pair of the Saucony Triumph 23, you might also be looking for the Brooks Ghost 17. Now, the Brooks Ghost 17 has a reduction in drop this year, but it's only brought it down to be in line with the Triumph 23, and we have 36.5 in the heel, 26.5 in the forefoot for that 10mm drop. My size weighs in at 347 grams, so that makes the Ghost in my size 16 grams heavier than that of the Triumph 23. However, the Ghost is only going to cost you $150, so the Triumph 23 is $20 more. Next up, you may be thinking about the Diadora Nucleo 2. Now, the Diadora Nucleo 2 has 38-33 for a 5mm drop, so it's like half the drop of the Triumph 23, and that is neither good nor bad, it's just different. In my size, the Nucleo 2 tips the scale at 335 grams, so it's only 4 grams heavier than my size of the Triumph 23, and the Nucleo 2 comes in at $160, so it does cost $10 less than the Triumph 23. And finally, I think we also need to look at the Hoka Bondi 9. Now, the Bondi 9 has 43 in the heel, 38 in the forefoot for a 5mm drop. Again, 5mm drop, 10mm drop. But the Bondi 9 in my size tips the scale at a huge 362 grams. So that's 31 grams heavier than the Triumph 23, and it'll cost the same price as the Triumph 23. So what do you think? Have you run in any of the Triumphs over the years? This is a long-lasting franchise. And are you thinking of picking up a pair of the Triumph 23 this year? Drop a comment and let me know. But for now, it's Matt B. This has been my review for Saucony Triumph 23. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.